Today's guest is Alexis Kingsbury, who is an award-winning entrepreneur, currently running two software businesses with remote and global teams, serving over 500 organizations around the world, including well-known brands such as Sony, 3M, Swarovski, Fitness First, and Pepsi. And through his work, Alexis has helped hundreds of business leaders to save them thousands of hours of each of their time each year and enable them to work more effectively and unlock their business's growth. So, Alexis, thank you very much for being here. How are you doing today?
Yeah, it's a pleasure, and thank you for having me. Yeah, no, I'm really good today. It's been a busy one, but productive, so all good.
Awesome. Well, as far as Mondays go, I think that is a great way to begin the week. So I appreciate that. So I'd love for you to start us off and like let everybody know, even just from that short bio, clearly, you're somebody that does a lot of good work. So I'd love to dive further into like, how did you get to doing what you're doing? How did you get to here? Kind of floor is yours for that.
Sure. So, I mean, I was an entrepreneurial kid. I tried lots of different ideas, right through from washing cars and trying to do websites and so on. But I really struggled to make anything scale, and I always wanted to kind of create businesses that could grow beyond me. I studied management science at university to try and learn. I became a management consultant and worked with loads of organizations like Honda and BP and UK government and so on to try and learn how they scaled. And eventually created my own business with a co-founder with the aim of building actually software businesses. Like we started off as a consultancy, but I wanted to build software businesses. And so we tried a few different ideas, eventually pivoted to one called Spider Gap, which is an online 360-degree feedback tool, and found it really, really hard, like hard to get traction and find the right product market fit. And then when we did, like create it, like working out how to market and sell the product. But we went through and we iterated and hired people and had to lose people and then hired again, but did it better and provided the proper processes and guidance the next time round after realizing that we learned that hiring a great salesperson, maybe like they can be the greatest salesperson in the world, but if you give them any of the knowledge and the guidance and the processes, yeah, they won't achieve great results for you. So learning to put those kind of things in place. And we've kind of iterated over the years, had some pretty deep moments where it got very, very scary. But we've also had some great successes. And as a result, we've kind of grown the business really well. As you mentioned, serving over 500 organizations. I think last check it's 580, something like that. We've got 7-figure revenues, got a global team across 5 of the 7 continents. So we're in, good shape in many ways. But one of the challenges that we found when kind of growing the business and scaling was that a lot of the processes, the guidance, the structures that we put in place so that people could do good work and not repeat the same mistakes and get started in a new role and get performing quickly, doing all of those things, we were having to use systems and workarounds that made it very messy and as a result time consuming to run. So as a result, about nearly 2 years ago, we started another software business, Air Manual, which makes it easy to kind of document your process and onboarding online as checklists. And then we found that actually business owners love it, but could do with a lot of help in terms of applying it. So as a result, we hired consultants and trained them up. And so then now they help business owners to do that too. So it's kind of been a really interesting journey where I feel like what we're now helping other business owners to do reflects the kind of journey that we've been on. And I'm now at a stage where I'm looking to get the message out and help more people, but that's not a competence and a discipline that I've particularly developed previously. With my previous businesses and so on, we've kind of done this incremental growth. We've developed products and services that are either already kind of similar to ones already available in the market, so people know where to find them and we just need to be there, or products and services where it's high value and therefore I've been able to do it by one-to-one selling and referrals. And so I'm kind of having to grow and develop as a business leader in that area of kind of communication and marketing and getting out there.
Beautiful. So it's like this story of like I knew exactly where my strengths were. They were,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term, like kind of like the background strengths. And now I've optimized for that. It's gotten to this point where it's its own, machine. But now there's like expansion that needs to be made. And I am at the forefront of that expansion. It's requiring me to step into a different role that I've been used to. So is that kind of accurate from your perspective?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's both a role and um, I guess a confidence around the experiences. Like you can read a load and listen to coaches and experts and so on, but often until you've done some of it, it doesn't feel easy, right? Um, it's a little bit like earlier this year, I ran in what's called the Rat Race in the UK, which is a 20-mile obstacle race with 200 obstacles. And I'd never done, I think the longest I'd done was like 6 miles as a run before. And so I'd never done it before. And so it's kind of terrifying and just, yeah, like I'd not really understanding how to do it. And then once you've done it, of course, it becomes something you go, oh, that wasn't so bad. Like I actually really enjoyed that. And yeah, so it kind of feels like we're there where we're kind of now having to do something new. And that's always initially scary and challenging.
Got it. It's like that distinction between like this is an embodied experience of like I actually went through it and I did, the reps and the motions and the thing,
Mhm.
whereas before it was just like kind of like an intellectual understanding. So yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And if I were to zoom out from there, it's like, so you listen to this story and you're like, man, like this is like a very cool story. You're in a very good position that so many businesses try to be in, so many founders try to like be in. It's like, well, this guy, like everything's perfect, like there must not be like anything wrong. And obviously we all know that that's always not the
Yeah.
case. So what I'm curious then is kind of like what is present for you right now to bring to this conversation.
Yeah, well, I think I'm trying to remember where I've heard it from. It's probably a book with this title, but it makes me think of the obstacle is the way. And it's like I feel like there's as you say, like wherever you're at in your business, there's always another thing to address. Like your reward for solving a problem is a maybe slightly better quality problem. That's just like the standard. Like even if you make loads of money, you have a new problem called what to do with the money,
Yeah.
such that you keep it or whatever. And so I think I sort of identify with the fact that, like as you say, we've kind of played to strengths. We've done some things that have got us into a great position, but I feel like there's so much more that we can do. And I feel like the way that I've approached things so far has been a very organic, organized, referral based, let's eke out another 10%. And then when I speak to other entrepreneurs, peers, etc., who have done crazy, amazing things on their marketing and their sales and getting the message out there and just going from, you know, 0 to 60 in a ridiculously short period of time. And I look at that and I'd love to look at that and just be like, what one person can do, so can another. I'm going to go do that. And so I try, obviously I'm working on my ability to do those things. But yeah, I think in terms of the mental baggage that comes with that, it's that feeling of what if I can't, to go back to that like obstacle race example, like there was a very real risk that I would crash out at some point. And there was moments like when I was literally running and I'm just like I'm feeling twinges. How far away am I that if I decided, I'm out and I'm just going back to like where the finish line is? Like I actually don't know where I am, and gut feel is I'm a long way away from a warm drink and a sit down. So I'm gonna keep gonna keep running, and then after a while, like got back in the mix and I was okay. And I wonder whether you know but as a result, there's a very real risk. There's a real risk of it failing, and therefore I have a similar feeling of like, I want to be out there. I want to get out there to as many people as possible and help them achieve some of the things that we've achieved. But I've got to do it by, I think I've got to do it by things that I've never done before successfully, and not through lack of trying, right? Like I've tried various different ways, particularly for other businesses in the past, where I've tried to like get message out and do those things, and just yeah, like I don't know what's held me back. I think sometimes it's when I'm trying to do the messaging, when I'm trying to simplify it, or I'm trying to turn it into a landing page, webinar, whatever. I think sometimes I want to add so much value that I cram too much in, and so I think it becomes more difficult to buy or share or whatever, because I'm just wanting to be like, let me help you solve this problem. Here's everything you need. And I think often the person receiving that is just like, wow, okay, thank you. I now need to go and unpack all of this stuff. So and sometimes I can even end up frustrated. Like I can end up frustrated that, I'll feel like I've demonstrated like logically and shown like here's exactly how you can put 1 hour in and get like 5, 10, 15 hours out of like and free up your time, which like most valuable resource. Like we've all got the same amount. It's very hard to buy it back and so on. And once it's gone, it's gone. Like, and I can show them that, and then the frustration is that doesn't either that doesn't click, or it's like, yep, completely agree, but let me think about it, or give me some time, or like, or whatever. And so yeah, I think some of that kind of holds me back from sharing and getting out there more, maybe.
Got it. So you mentioned like leadership, you mentioned obstacle is the way. So when it comes to you evolving into this part of your leadership, what would you define from your perspective right now the obstacle?
um what I define as the obstacle there? Yeah, I'm trying to dig out to it, or zoom out of it, as to what's the obstacle behind the obstacle. It's probably about making the message clear enough, and then repeating that. And I think that's often what I struggle with, because because there's a lot I can talk about. I feel very comfortable, like with my background as a management consultant and so on. I've got a lot of stories. I can form a lot of structures and so on the fly, and I can tailor it to people's situations. But then that doesn't translate well to, say, trying to create a landing page or whatever, where it's like you don't know who's going to land there. Like it needs to do that messaging. So I think that's part of it,
So
is that,
put
and
it
then
a
the
different
repeating the
way,
message I tend to hold
right?
back from.
Because that answer, while it absolutely sounds logical, it's like, yeah, that's a very real
Mm.
problem in your, customer journey funnel, and like where could I optimize it and all the things, right? Which is like, I don't obviously know you well, but like I can tell even from our short time together, like your strength is in your ability to use your brain. Like that's just, it's abundantly clear in how you talk and how you break things down, and how you're like, well, I excel and when I can see all the pieces together, and like I can see your
Mm-hmm.
solution for you, but like I can't express it
Mm.
to you, and it's like frustrating because like you're making a decision that's gonna like wrongly impact you, and my inability to communicate it
Yeah,
is gonna be the ripple effect. It's like I
spot on.
see all of that. So if you were to flip that same question around, and like not about the obstacle in the process, but what is the obstacle to you becoming the leader that is clear on how I meet the people where they're at, what do you think the answer might be?
Short answer, I don't know.
Fair. So if you had to
um,
guess, what do you think it might be?
uh, so looking internally, what holds me back from already knowing the answer, like as in terms of not already seeing the way through.
Potentially knowing the answer. I would argue that it's probably your head being like, well, what's the missing piece that I'm
Yeah.
like not looking into? Uh, where I invite you more to look at is because you mentioned leadership multiple times. So it's like, what's the obstacle of me becoming the leader, like stepping into the leader that can extract or harness the clarity from with it? Like, what quality would that leadership version of me have, and what
Mm.
might the obstacle be right now? And if the answer is I don't know, that's totally fine. I'm just curious to see what comes up for you.
Um, yeah, well, I guess that's what I was thinking when I was saying the ability to distill the message, like the quality in terms of as a leader. I mean, as a leader more generally, it's a powerful and useful trait if you can distill a message to something, very simple. Like you've got the classic Steve Jobs kind of standing up there and saying, a million songs in your pocket, or what we're doing is magical, or whatever, and then the ability to repeat that. And that's as a leadership skill more generally, like having to repeat that message is a key thing. So I wonder whether it's that behavior. I suppose that's a behavior though, is that breaking it down and then repeating it.
So it seems like there's a part of you that has a need to be like, what I extract right now has to be a repeatable process.
Interesting. I guess I wasn't looking at it as repeatable process, but that's an interesting point. Is there a risk that I'm trying to do that rather than being more willing to experiment and just go with it? Um,
So if we just stick with that thread,
yeah.
right? So what was it about that made you kind of perk up and be like, well, that's interesting. I didn't think of it that way. Like, what landed for you?
The thing that landed was that it's a trying to look for the repeatable process I've seen as a blocker for me in the past. Like trying to find okay, how do I make this scale? I've seen how when I'm doing it for areas that are new, like let's say we're selling a brand new product, we've never sold it before. The temptation in me is, okay, well, let me work out how would I sell this over and over. But actually, I've found in the past, I found that it's way better work out how to sell it, then work out how to do it over and over, but only once you've worked out what works. And so that's why it makes me smile that it's like my temptation is to look for the repeatable process, even if I've not yet found the magic solution, like the magic formula. Because finding the magic formula requires, that's interesting, because it requires two things in my experience. It requires iteration, like you can't be too fixed, but also it requires being in the moment. If you're thinking too meta, then you're not listening and looking enough. And so, like in the sales example, you need to be in the sales conversation, seeing how are they responding to the thing I just said. Oh, not very well. Okay, let me ask another question to them. Oh, that's interesting. I wasn't expecting to go in that direction. Let me ask this question then. Oh, okay, they like that. And it's like you need to be present in that so that eventually you work out, okay, here's how I go through a sales conversation where you're able to describe their problem in a way that's better than they can, and then you can present the solution in a way that's completely matches to that, and then they go, yep, absolutely need this. And then you document that and get someone and train up other people to do it. But I think maybe that's what's holding me back, is I'm trying to be too cerebral, using my brain to solve a problem that I need to solve by being more in the moment and doing. But it's hard. Like it's hard because I feel like I've sometimes done that, not got the result, and don't feel clear why. I guess partly because that's easier when you're in a one-to-one conversation, or even in an in-person workshop. But it's hard to then know why. I don't know. Yeah.
So, okay. So first and foremost, I agree with you on the general sentiment of what you said. And I acknowledge you for allowing yourself verbally to like just follow your own thoughts. Like you're talking about presence. Like this is a good example of like, well, this is all of the things that are like rippling in my head and I'm just like spewing it out, which is good. It's a good way to gain clarity. So I acknowledge you for that as well. Um, what I would add as an extension to that is leadership a like mechanistic systemic thing that can be broken down?
Um. Yes and no.
Perfect. So in what ways yes, and what ways no?
So yes, in terms of there are definitely some behaviors, attributes, and processes, and like repeatable things that as a leader, if you're not doing, then like no matter how much soft skill and the art of it, it's not going to work. Like if you're not on a regular basis identifying, okay, what are our top priorities, and as a result, distilling that into something that can be communicated in the team. If you're not recognizing people's contribution and painting a vision and showing the progress towards that, if you're not doing those things, and those are behaviors, those are tangible things that we could put in someone's calendar. If you're not doing those things, it makes it hard to lead effectively, because even if you're just in.
So I'm just going to cut you off, not
Yeah, sure.
because I don't believe what you're saying is not important. I think it's actually very relevant and very accurate. It's just I don't want your brain to go on another tangent,
sure.
right? Because I know it's like you pick up on one thing and then it like you find the 10 ripple effects of like that, and then your brain just goes. And I just want to stick to the point, which is the only reason why I'm going to interrupt it, and I may do so in the future, but it's just for that reason, just so you're aware.
I'm very happy with that.
Okay, perfect. So that's kind of the yes, and I get that, right? Like to be a leader, there are practices of leadership that I have to demonstrate in order to maintain the momentum of my leadership. 110%. So in what ways? No, right? Because the original question was, is leadership mechanistic and like a system that you can break down? So that's the yes. What's the no?
So I guess the parts I'd say are no. I'd say there are some, I don't know, soft traits like the ability to listen effectively and to break things down, and to distill a message, and to communicate that well, and to do so enthusiastically. I think, those are softer skills that are not behaviors that you can just put in your calendar. They're traits that need to be practiced and developed and used. I don't subscribe to a belief that some people have them, some people don't. I think there are some people who naturally avoid it because it uses traits and so on, and skills that they prefer not to. Like there are some people who just don't like to talk enthusiastically about a thing, and therefore they're not going to. They will struggle as a leader, because part of it is painting a rosy, exciting vision. So I think there's some of those things, but yeah, I'd say some of those things are the sort of the art of it that's harder to break down.
Correct. So if you were to rewind back your answers to these questions, and if you were to listen to them, and I will reflect back to you what I heard, and obviously you can retort or whatever does not resonate with you. You mentioned leadership. I brought leadership back to you as like, is it this mechanistic, systemic thing? Your answer to yes was to break down leadership into those components. Like if I do these things, if I do it in these orders, if I hit these like milestones with people, like if I put them into these systems, these processes, I take the input, I'm going to spit out leadership, right? That's going to be the output. And then the part that was harder was like, okay, well, there's a soft skills, which you can practice. And they're like, if I say these things, then I'm going to like kind of potentially get this, or if I ask these questions, or if I try and tune into and get better at this skill, underneath it all, there's still this sense of like, it's a bit more nebulous, but there's still the sense of like, with this input, I am likely to get this output. It's less deterministic than the yes, but like somewhere with a more flowy thing, we're kind of going to get there. So before I go on, like, does that resonate with you, or is there something I missed there?
No, I'd agree with that. One of the soft traits that I feel I missed was kind of around risk taking, which I feel is relevant to some of the things we're talking about, of putting oneself out there, because I think that's a part of leadership as well. And again, that's how do you can't schedule taking risks. What you can do is kind of practice doing stuff and get more confident accepting the risk of failure, and doing those sorts of things. So I think but I'd still agree an input with a desired output. Like you put the input of enthusiasm because the output you want is excited people listening who then buy into what you're talking about. You put the input of risk taking because you want the output of hopefully an upside. You put the input of thinking about mitigating risks and so on because you want the output of mitigating your downside. So as you say, there's still inputs outputs, but it's less easy to diarize and check off.
100%. And if there was a way to, Boolean logic, how to do leadership, I think you'd be the perfect person to like break that down, because that's exactly what it sounded like. And the reason I'm asking you these questions and I'm kind of leading you in this way, it's like the last answer you just had about risk taking, that was the first human answer you've had about leadership.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is you get to define leadership how you want to define it, and that's fine, right? But fundamentally, as the leader within your organization, there are a lot of leadership aspects that are going to fall into that, if then input output aspect. I would argue or invite you to consider whether that is more the operational delegation of what I ultimately want leadership to be, and the checks and balances that ensure that my leadership is getting the output that I want, right? But beyond that, the reason why I highlight, well, risk taking is the first human thing you've mentioned, is because there was nothing in your answers about being, right? Like, who am I being?
Yeah.
As like, how do I show up? Who do I have to be? What personal qualities do I have to like step into in order to be a leader? And this is a classic case of, the kind of like the man with the hammer, right? Like everything becomes a nail, and you are so good and you've gotten such great results with using your brain to solve problems, which makes sense why like I started out in the back end and like we got the success, because there was less dependency on the human aspect. And I don't say any of this like in a judging or like look at what you're missing kind of way. I say this in a very real, this is extremely common with people who are intellectually gifted, right? So it's like a classic example is like you can't outthink your emotions. Like that's one example of that. Similarly, you can't outthink or outboolean your way into empathy. So like your empathy to the other and your attunement to the other is going to be in a direct reflection to your attunement to yourself. So it's like the more that I can actually tune into, well, what do I feel right now from a somatic, like sensory perspective, from a feeling perspective, from an internal world perspective, not a, input, output, result oriented perspective, the more attuned you are going to be with meeting people where they're at, right? Because, and the other part that I was going to get you to like give you as a question as well, it's like, well, what if you are not technically correct, but are connecting with somebody, like on a human level, right? Because the people you are serving ultimately don't have your skill set. Therefore, it's like if you just forget what you're doing, like think of somebody that needs to lose a lot of weight. They're like 100 pounds overweight, and you're talking to them about like meal prepping and like eating this type of way and like exercise. Meanwhile, like really what they need to just acknowledge is like, hey, like I want to make a change, and like switching from Coke to Diet Coke would be enough. But it's like in your head, you're like, man, that's not going to get you anywhere. It doesn't matter. You're not meeting people where they're at. And the only way you can do that is if your empathy is at a level where you can show up to like connect with that part of themselves, and then be okay with the fact that your brain's going to go 10 steps ahead, but it doesn't matter. Emotionally, as presence, as who this person is with where they're at, and my understanding, not of their technical things, but of their human perception of where they're at, their needs, their wants, their feelings, then I can meet them there. And from there, when the time is right, trickle the gift that is my logic and my intellect. So what's landing for you from that?
Yeah, so love that. Completely agree. And it's interesting you talk about the empathy side and leaning into the intellectual and so on. One of the journeys that I've gone on personally has been a diagnosis of my son as being autistic, not severely, but it's because it's a it's a spectrum. And so there's been various things that we've put in place at school and all these things to support him. And one of the things I definitely identify with is some of those traits of autism, and so have identified myself as being mildly autistic. One of the challenges of that is struggling with empathy, but I think something I've come to learn over time is that I remember looking at it previously and thinking, what? So struggling with empathy like a sociopath, like a psychopath, like not caring what people think. But it's not that. If anything, it's the opposite. Like I and my son care a lot what people think. You know, if anything, we're worried that we might cause offense through our own dumb, like inability to understand the situation that we're in. And therefore, we're incredibly careful about, well, particularly personally, I'm very careful about not causing offense, but also not causing inconvenience, not making work for others. Interesting, might reference even to the start of our conversation, Josco. And so I'm very conscious of that, and I think I am good at having one-to-one conversations with people and asking questions. You know, the consultant in me means that I'm able to ask questions and really unpick it and then go, okay, here's how we solve it, and understand like where they're at. But I really struggle with that group empathy, that sort of sense of understanding where someone might be when they get to a landing page or whatever. Like it's not like, you know, even if I've learned over my life to overcome, you know, some of the challenges that that perhaps some autistic traits can give me around struggling with autism. Like I can read people well, I can understand all of that. I can't do that when they're on a landing page. Like and yet, as you say, like you need to meet people where they are. And so maybe it's paring back the ambition, or paring back the 10 steps, and trying to start from a much lower ambition point of view, which even as I say it, I can feel my body resisting, right? Like it's like, what? Why would I do that? Why would I do a workshop where I'm basically like to use that same analogy, like I've got workshop with a room of people, they're all 100 pounds overweight, and and they want to lose weight, and yet I'm basically going to tell them to switch diet coke. It's like, what? Why would I do that?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I haven't yet worked out how I overcome that, or how I tap in, how I fully tap into what it is that therefore is appropriate to, as you put it, meet people where they're at.
So, well, first and foremost, beautiful awareness. And again, I just want to acknowledge you for the openness to go there and how freely you allow yourself to go there. Because for people that are so head oriented, you know, my experience is usually like the defenses will usually come up before they allow themselves to go where you went that quickly. So I just want to acknowledge you for that, because it's not a small thing. The nuance that I would reflect back to you in that is, like you mentioned when you're talking about your son, and then like you notice qualities with yourself, and the word careful came about. Like I'm actually very attuned to like what's going on, but I'm very careful that I don't stir any like feathers, or however you want to call it, like whatever the terminology is you want to call it. So careful, when taken to a bigger extreme, becomes control. So when I can logically throw so much at the situation to control it as much as possible, then not only do I control for my own safety, in that, okay, well, I won't be perceived a particular way, but two, if I overwhelm my environment, in this instance of people, with so much logic that I'm naturally stronger at them, they don't have like they are too in the tornado of what I'm throwing at them to potentially ever be a threat to me emotionally, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that is or is not like your conscious decision, but I'm just saying when you take carefulness to an extreme, you are basically optimizing your gift to ensure that your emotional like baseline is never rattled, right? Which,
Yeah.
while keeping you safe, is great. However, the flip side of that coin is then I can't access that emotional range to then get better at meeting people where they're at. And that
Yeah.
discomfort that you mentioned, like when I think of, I'm going to use the word dumbing down, not because I'm like disrespecting who you work with or whatever. It just more for the sake of like, my brain knows this is where I need to go, but like other
Yeah.
people's aren't following. So from that perspective, dumbing down what I reveal, like that discomfort is really that, like, oh crap, like I'm gonna be just doing like half a step forward with these people, like what's going to come up if they're not overwhelmed with
Yeah.
information, what like, oh, then they get upset with like just that bit, then they're not going to see the value and everything, then they're not going to buy, like then you get into the inner critic, you get into kind of the
Mm.
insecurities around that, right? So it seems like a nuanced little thing, but it
No,
opens up a
okay.
whole world. So again, what is landing for you there?
Yeah, no, I like that, and it's interesting. So two thoughts that occurred on the or feelings on the dumbing down thing. So I think one is that sense of like, am I serving them enough? Like, it's a big motivator for me is I want to serve people, I want to help people, and therefore that feeling of, am I really going to go in there for half an hour and a half workshop, or you know spend a load of time and money advertising to go to a landing page or whatever to just give them this? Like, is that feeling of being like, firstly, I don't, because I'm looking at it thinking, as you say, like 10 steps down to one, as you say, like the kind of dumbing down bit, or just reduction of scope, if we were to kind of be politer. It's like, for me, I'm just kind of going, like I wouldn't value that, therefore, and of course that's not meeting people where they're at. It's like that's almost the opposite of
Yeah.
me saying, well, what would I value, because I'm not there. So that was one sort of feeling I had around it. And then the second one, which is probably a bit deeper, was probably, and I'm not sure whether this is true, but the thought that I had, or the risk that I think is there, is, am I at risk of almost feeling like if I don't give them more, like if I don't give them the 10 or the 8 or the 5 or whatever, and instead I give them this one tiny little thing here, will they think less of me? And that's because, of course, that's either a real risk, because frankly I could turn up to a presentation, deliver this, and then think, what an idiot. Like, did he literally, like, you imagine you turn up to a load of athletes and say, you should really switch from Coke to Diet Coke, and they just go, who is this guy? Like, that could actually happen. And of course, in the business world, I'm showing up to large groups of people, and online, like, or in person, and there is a mix, and there are some absolute legends, and in many cases I'm looking at them going, wow, you've achieved some fantastic things in areas like marketing or whatever that I can only dream of, but I'm just ahead in a different area. So I kind of look up to that. So I do feel that risk of, what if they just think this is dumb and not useless, and therefore rate me in that way? But that's
So just pause
yeah.
right there. Why don't you turn that around and replace every they or them with I or me?
uh do I have enough recall of that thought process? I was trying to be very in the
So
moment
if
there.
I give them the 1 out of 10, will
Yeah.
they think that is enough, or they're gonna think like this is
Yeah.
silly or
So
whatever it was?
if I give me the 1 out of 10, will I think that is enough? uh yeah. I'm not sure I think around that way. uh I guess, um no, I need some help on that. Like,
Sure. So okay, I'll just and I know the exact wording as well, but
Yeah,
like
yeah,
we'll just kind of summarize it. If I give them a 1 out of 10, will I think I'm enough about myself? Will I think this is good enough for my own delivery?
Mm. To which I'd probably, if I like, and if I was coaching myself, I'd be saying like, depends on what you're valuing. Like, if the
Fair.
eight,
And that's the
yeah,
logical answer. But notice right now in this room, there's nobody judging you. Your ideal customers are not in this room.
yeah,
Yeah, where your brain goes to is I'm surrounded by people I look up to.
mhm,
If I dumb it down for them, they're going to think I'm a fool. You're already judging yourself before we've
mhm.
started. And I know I've used harsh words and it's not
Yeah,
your
yeah,
wording, but I think you
to
get the
yeah,
essence of
to
what I'm saying.
exaggerate and make it easier to see. Yeah, yeah, no, that's good. Um, yeah, agreed. And you know, even when I was sharing a thought, I said I'm not sure whether this is true because I'm not. I think in general, as you're probably seeing in this call, I think I'm transparent enough and open enough to be wrong and to change my view. Like I think that's been something I've probably worked on a lot is like the ability to form a view and hold it and present it, but also hold it loosely because I, you know, I don't want to be that guy. um, so
Which, and again, I'm going to just add nuance to all
yeah,
these things because I think you
yeah,
can take it. It's a solution orientation, right?
mhm,
Your safety is in scanning the world,
yeah,
looking for problems and the
yes,
solutions to them.
yes,
So, like, if I own my faults, then I
yes,
can quickly solve a problem and
one
step
hundred
into a
percent,
solution. Correct.
yes,
Right? Great trait to have, one step removed from the being, because it skips over, well, who am I when I just sit with the grace and the acceptance of making a mistake? You actually do that part in the solution, but what you skip is the feeling part of that, is the empathy part of that, right?
yeah,
Because you've solved the problem. It's no longer a problem. I can move on with my life. But we never have to
yeah,
address like which part of me maybe felt neglected, maybe felt unseen, maybe, kind of like if you're going to look back to your own child, right? Like, do you just solve the problem or do you acknowledge the person, the child, their feeling, their experience, and then help them through the problem? Right? It's like
mm,
that part is also being skipped internally. And it's just by
yeah.
default because your brain works so quickly in and
Because
out.
I'm moving on to the next challenge, right? Obstacle of the way,
Correct.
etc. Yeah, yeah, agreed. And as a result, I suppose that the risk there is that it means that if I'm not fully acknowledging how I was feeling before the problem was solved and recognizing what that's then done for me, that makes it harder for me to meet people where they're at because I'm not able, because what I should be doing, I guess, or a tool that I could be using to meet people where they're at and think about what that one dumbed down or descoped version is to think, where was I? Like if I want to meet people where they're at, I should be looking at where was I when I was where they are in this particular area, and therefore what was I feeling? Because if I
Yes.
was feeling like, you know, I all of this just feels overwhelming. Like, for example, if we were ahead of this conversation 10 years hence, and I was looking back at me now and going, how was I feeling about ability to distill the message, put the message out there? Like, if I just solve this problem, I'd just be like, oh yeah, no, I solved another problem. Whereas I need to be able to articulate how it felt at the time and what I would probably have accepted then as being a sensible next step. So maybe that, yeah, as you say, maybe by skipping over, it reduces my ability to then do that.
Correct. And again, I totally agree with everything. And I would add a nuance to it that's kind of like bleeding into the sales bit as well here. It's like, yes, understanding where it is that I was at the time that I had this problem, but then not also just how I felt, because like I fully trust in your ability to like look at somebody, be like, oh, this person's feeling frustration, right? Like going back to that kind of like
Yeah.
wrong sociopathic like concern. It's like, no, like you obviously know when somebody's upset or they're
Yeah.
frustrated. So it's not like that's kind of the surface level thing. What's underneath that is your brain's like, okay, well, this person's feeling frustrated. Well, clearly they're frustrated because XYZ system is not optimized and whatever. So if I solve that problem, they won't be frustrated. Correct and appropriate once they are in the process of being a client with you. That's like an onboarding conversation. But if you're talking about where am I at beforehand, really it is that frustration is the surface level problem. But it's
Yeah.
like, how can I step into their world and understand the far-reaching consequences of what that means about them as a business owner, what that means about them and how they show up in their life, what that means about their ability to lead their team because they can't this part together. What does it mean about them that they can't understand it and they feel, less than in their own way with the fact that they can't get this together? Like that is the human part of the technical problem. And the reason you are good at solving the technical problem is because you have an innate ability to just focus on the objective problem. Most people don't. They're stuck in the weeds of all of their, basically the baggage and the drama behind the math, right? Like you're looking at this like math, they're like, well, I know 2 + 2 is 4, but like this and that. And like, it's just like, we don't need all that stuff. And you can get right down to the core of it, which is a beautiful thing on the execution and fulfillment side. On this side, it is, all that baggage is irrelevant. All that baggage is what you want to get rid of. All that baggage is exactly why you're experiencing the problems you have. I can help you solve that baggage through this other thing. And I know we're kind of blending your leadership with like things in sales, but I'm just highlighting to you how your bypassing of this, conscious or unconscious, is creating the blind spot for you to meet people where they're at. Right. So again, what lands for you there?
No, all of it. That's amazing. No, I love that. I think as you say, like with the frustration surface level, and so I think stepping into that, as you say, like the consequences to their life and embracing that. I think somehow I think because I'm looking to jump to, like, because I'm wanting to add value, right? So let's say I'm on
in the way
stage
that
now.
you know how and have practiced for decades, which is my brain and all the other things. Right?
Correct. Yes, good catch. Because of course I can add value by recognizing how people feel and making them feel that's normal. That is value. And whereas you're right, even now I'm filtering like, oh, that's not value. Value is the solution. So, and that's I need to split those two things. So I can totally see how I skip some of the consequences and stepping in, because I'm like, I could spend 5 minutes talking about how this particular business owner that we helped, like the impact of them working 60-hour weeks and working weekends and doing all these things and what that meant for their life and what that meant for their team. But it's like, they know that already. They're probably in that feeling. Like, let me close that and instead tell them the solution. And of course, like that doesn't create the it doesn't create the resonance. It doesn't make them feel like yes, this problem is how I feel and match up, and therefore I'm now open to what the solution might be. And instead they'd be resistant to it because they're like, this just sounds like a load of stuff. Like, to go back to that losing weight analogy, it's like, being told, right, so what you need to do is basically run a marathon. It's like, but I can't run, and some days I can't get out of bed. It's like, instead I need to step back into that. Okay, how did it feel? How did it feel for me? But also I was actually thinking, it doesn't even need to be how did it feel for me? Like, I have had these conversations and worked with clients that have been in these places, and I can totally remember and have got notes on and can go back to how did they feel at the time? What were the consequences? But it's not that I'm glossing over it. It's that I'm like limiting the time spent on it, because I'm like, they don't want to hear about that, which of course is the opposite. It's like, that is the bit that people actually care about.
Correct. So basically what you're identifying there is like, that is the business solution to, this problem. Your over time ability to get better at that skill. Yes, practice is going to be one of it, iteration, reps, all of that, 100% true. the depth to which you can go to this understanding is going to be directly proportional to your depth and ability to do it within yourself or to do it within the people close to you, right? Because you saw how quickly your brain just default, you don't even notice it, right?
Yeah.
It's like when I pointed out, oh yeah, you're right. So that's basically it. So now it's basically the decision in front of you is like, okay, well, knowing this, do I then do the work to build my own capacity for this emotional body, this human aspect of my leadership, or do I choose not to do that and just recognizing my skill, strength, and or limitation, outsource that to somebody else who I trust? Like, there's no right or wrong answer here. Just like, this is kind of going back to the beginning. It's your leadership definition. What kind of leader do you want to be? I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. It's what side of you do you want to develop is really what the question is in front of you.
Yeah.
So that is a much deeper question.
Yeah.
And just for the sake of time, I
Yeah.
just want to
So
begin to
I
close
know.
this off. But as far as just kind of understanding what's in front of you, does this feel complete for you?
Yeah, yeah, it does. No, I think that's really interesting. I think, as you say, it opens up a whole new chapter of exploring those options and what that might look like and how one would even go about some of those things, which don't immediately jump to mind, which is both interesting because it's because normally I've got some reference point I can use, whereas with that I haven't. But also, it's interesting that maybe that's good. Maybe I'm opening myself up to the fact that there isn't necessarily a here we go, and then you do step zone B and C. So no, that's really cool. And I love the I love the the nuance points that you've highlighted around like, being too careful can actually be taken to a discomfort with lack of control, which means that you end up like defaulting to let me throw a load of stuff at this so that I maintain control and protect myself, which then means that I'm not then doing what we've discussed, which is tapping more into what was the feeling, what was the consequence, where was I, or where was the person that I was helping, and then using that for me to tap into, and therefore, what's the person that's reading this, listening to this, hearing this, attending this, what are they likely to be feeling? Because when I'm in a one-to-one, I can ask.
Correct.
um, so yeah, it's about using those experiences to tap into that. And I think as you mentioned before, like, and also in real time when I'm experiencing moments like this, like tapping into that, how do I feel about this and what's the impact?
Correct. What is my internal experience? And then when you get good at that, you don't have to spend as much brain power on it. And then it'll be, okay, well, what is their internal experience?
Yeah.
And then you get into further nuance of, is communication actually happening? I know we're exchanging words, but is communication actually happening? And then two, what are they saying beneath the surface? They'll say
Mm.
words, but what do they actually mean? As told by other actions, as told by like further listening. It's kind of like, if you look at this conversation today, right? Like, you will have said a innocent word like careful, and it opened up this whole other world,
Yeah.
right? That's I only know that because I've went through my own journeys and have walked clients through journeys like that, where innocent sounding words are great covers, especially by intelligent people who say them eloquently, for wells of exploration and growth and evolution, right?
Mm.
But it's like, I can see that because I've spent a lot of time cultivating like
Yeah,
the
that's
being
awesome.
aspect, right? And I'm not even saying this to kind of like compare and like look at me or whatever,
No,
but it's just, you have a clear experience of what that can mean. So it's like, imagine having that capacity on your end when you're about to close like a big deal. You know what I mean? So like, that's kind of where this can translate into
yeah.
business growth and profit, and not to mention more fulfillment, because you're less banging your head against the wall of like, why isn't this working?
Yeah, no, I love that. Cool. Awesome.
Perfect. Well,
Thank you very
in that
much.
case, thank you very much for coming and showing up in this way. If you want to just close us off and let everybody know, who's the best person to find you, where can they find you? Floor is yours for that.
Yeah, sure. Lovely. Well, thank you. I've got a lot of value from this. And yeah, if anyone would like to connect with me, and you've seen that I'm pretty open, so as a result, feel free to give me your own thoughts on the situation, or share your own experiences, or your own feelings and consequences. I'd hugely value that. You can connect with me on most social media platforms, particularly LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. I'm Alexis Kingsbury. There aren't many out there. There's even fewer that are male, and there's certainly only one that's also the co-founder of Air Manual. So you can go check that out. Do reach out and connect with me. And as you've heard on this call, whilst there are numerous areas that I'm working on and struggling to and working on improving, I am very good at solving people's problems and giving them really clear roadmaps on how to particularly solve things like freeing up time and sorting out their processes and make their business work day to day without them. So if they're interested in finding out more, please do go to airmanual.co or reach out. But yeah, no, it's been great talking to you, Josco. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, it's been a pleasure on my end as well. So yeah, we'll include all of your socials and all that good things in the show notes. And yeah, for everybody else listening, we'll see you on the next one.